The Afghan sun hammered down on the Helmand Valley like molten bronze, turning the jagged rocks into ovens and the air into something you had to chew. It was September, the tail end of fighting season, when the Taliban grew bold and the mountains became death traps for anyone stupid enough to walk into them. 450 Marines had walked in, not because they were stupid, but because their orders demanded it. They were the Second Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, tasked with clearing a known Taliban stronghold in the Sangin District. Intelligence said the enemy had retreated. Intelligence, as it turned out, was catastrophically wrong. Now they were pinned down in a narrow valley with sheer cliffs on 3 sides, taking fire from dug-in positions they couldn't reach, couldn't see, and couldn't destroy. Mortars rained down like hail. Machine gun fire tore through the rocks. RPGs screamed overhead, detonating in plumes of dust and shrapnel. The Marines were entrenched, dug in behind whatever cover they could find. But they were trapped. Air support was delayed. Apache gunships were grounded due to mechanical failure. Drones were already depleted from earlier operations. The AC-130 gunship that was supposed to provide overwatch had been diverted to another crisis 200 miles north. All they had left was a single flight of A-10 warthogs on station, low on fuel, low on ammunition, and already cleared to return to base. The mission commander had given the order. Return to Bagram. Nothing more you can do here. But one pilot didn't leave. Her call sign was Valkyrie. Her real name was Captain Mara Cross. She had been circling above the valley for the past 40 minutes, listening to the increasingly desperate radio calls from the ground, watching the thermal signatures of Marines being pushed further and further into a kill box they couldn't escape. She was not supposed to stay. She was not supposed to engage without forward air controller clearance. She was not supposed to risk her aircraft, her life, or her career for a mission that had already been deemed unsalvageable. But she stayed anyway, because 450 men were about to die, and she was the only thing standing between them and annihilation. Mara Cross had not always been a combat pilot. She had been a farm kid from rural Montana, raised on a cattle ranch 30 miles outside of Great Falls. Her father had been a crop duster, one of those old-school pilots who flew beat-up Cessnas over wheat fields, dodging power lines and praying the engine didn't quit. He taught her to fly when she was 14, letting her take the stick during long runs over golden pastures. You don't fight the plane, he told her. You become part of it. You feel what it feels. You know what it needs before it does. Mara had loved flying from the first moment. Not the glamorous kind, not the Top Gun fighter jet fantasy. She loved the grit of it. The machinery, the physics, the brutal honesty of a plane that either flew or didn't. There was no faking competence at 500 feet with a stall warning screaming in your ear. She joined the Air Force at 18, not because she wanted to serve, though she did, but because she wanted to fly the kind of planes that mattered, the kind that could save lives. She didn't want to drop bombs from 30,000 feet and never see the impact. She wanted to be close. She wanted to see the battlefield, read the chaos, and make decisions that saved people in real time. That led her to the A-10 Thunderbolt, the Warthog, the ugliest, slowest, most indestructible close air support aircraft ever built. It was a flying tank built around a 30mm rotary cannon that fired depleted uranium rounds capable of shredding armored vehicles like paper. Other pilots mocked the A-10. It was slow, ungainly and outdated. Fighter jocks called it the flying gun, not as a compliment. But Mara loved it. Because the A-10 wasn't about speed or elegance. It was about staying in the fight when everyone else had gone home. It was about flying low and slow through hell itself to protect the men on the ground. She graduated top of her class at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, earned her combat certification in Iraq, and deployed to Afghanistan 3 times. She had flown over 200 combat missions, logged more than 1,000 hours in the cockpit, and never, not once, lost a soldier she was assigned to protect. But she had also earned a reputation, not for recklessness, but for independence. She questioned orders that didn't make sense. She pushed back against commanders who prioritized bureaucracy over lives. She had been written up twice for unauthorized low-altitude passes, once for engaging a target without explicit clearance, and once for refusing to leave a danger zone until every friendly was accounted for. Her commanding officer, Colonel James Rutledge, had called her into his office after that last incident. "You're a hell of a pilot, Cross," he said. "But you're also a headache. You can't keep bending the rules. One day, you're going to break them, and I won't be able to protect you." She had looked him in the eye and said, "Sir, if following the rules means good men die, then I'll break them every time." He had sighed, shaken his head, and dismissed her. But he didn't ground her, because deep down, he knew she was right. Now, circling above the Helmand Valley, listening to the screams over the radio, Mara faced the choice that had been building her entire career. Obey orders and leave, or stay and fight. The voice of the forward air controller, a Marine captain named Luis Montoya, crackled over the radio. His voice was strained, cracking with exhaustion and fear. "Valkyrie, this is ground lead. We are taking heavy fire from the North Ridge. Estimate 200 hostiles in entrenched positions. We have multiple casualties, running low on ammunition. Request immediate close air support. Over." Mara keyed her mic. "Ground lead, Valkyrie. My flight has been recalled. I'm the only bird on station, and I'm already bingo fuel. Command says no additional support available for another 45 minutes. Over." There was a pause. Then Montoya's voice came back quieter, resigned. "Copy that, Valkyrie. Understand. Thanks for staying as long as you did. Ground lead out." She could hear it in his voice. He knew they were going to die. He was saying goodbye. Mara stared at her fuel gauge. She had maybe 20 minutes of loiter time left. 30 if she pushed it and risked flaming out on the way back to base. Her ammunition was low. She had 2 Mavericks, a half-load of rockets, and maybe 400 rounds left in her GAU-8 cannon. It wasn't enough to win the fight, but it might be enough to buy time. She thought about her father, about the way he used to say, "You don't leave people behind, Mara. Not ever." She thought about the 450 Marines below, men with families, with futures, with lives that mattered. She thought about the rules, the protocols, the chain of command. And then she made her choice. "Ground lead, Valkyrie. I'm not leaving. Repeat, I am staying on station. Transmitting targeting data now. Prepare for danger close fire mission. Over." There was a stunned silence. Then Montoya's voice, disbelieving. "Valkyrie, confirm. You are staying?" "Affirmative, ground lead. I am engaging. Mark your positions and get your heads down." "Valkyrie is going hot." She didn't wait for a response. She didn't wait for clearance. She rolled her A-10 into a steep dive, lined up on the northern ridge where the heaviest fire was coming from, and squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 roared to life, a sound like the sky tearing in half. A stream of depleted uranium rounds hammered into the ridge, shredding rock and flesh and steel. Explosions erupted along the Taliban positions as her cannon fire found ammunition caches and fuel stores. She pulled up hard, her airframe groaning under the G-forces, and banked left. Her radar warning receiver screamed. Someone had locked onto her with a surface-to-air missile. She punched flares, twisted into evasive maneuvers, and dove back toward the valley floor. The missile streaked past, detonating harmlessly 200 feet above her. She didn't slow down. She came around for another pass, this time targeting the eastern flank where mortars were raining down on the Marines. She ripple-fired her rockets, 6 in rapid succession, each one slamming into the ridgeline with precision. Secondary explosions lit up the mountainside as mortar tubes were obliterated. On the ground, Marines stared in disbelief. "She's still here!" someone shouted. "The A-10 is still here." Montoya grabbed his radio. "Valkyrie, you are cleared hot. Repeat, you are cleared hot. All targets of opportunity, danger close. We are marking friendlies with smoke. Yellow smoke. Copy yellow smoke. Engaging." For the next 15 minutes, Mara Cross became a one-woman war machine. She flew so low, the Taliban could see her face through the canopy. She ignored the tracer fire that stitched across her wings, ignored the proximity alarms, ignored the fuel gauge screaming at her to leave. She was not there to survive. She was there to win. She unleashed her mavericks on 2 fortified bunkers, obliterating them in twin fireballs. She strafed machine gun nests with her cannon, erasing them from existence. She made pass after pass, each one more dangerous than the last, until her ammunition ran dry and her fuel gauge hit red. Ground lead, Valkyrie. Winchester on all munitions. Fuel critical. I have to RTB. Over. Copy that, Valkyrie. You have given us breathing room. We are moving to extract. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mara didn't respond. She just climbed, her hands shaking on the stick, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She had done it. She had bought them time. But she had also just ended her career, because when she landed at Bagram, there would be hell to pay. Colonel Rutledge was waiting on the tarmac when she taxied in. His face was a mask of fury. Captain Cross, you are grounded, effective immediately. You will report to my office in 1 hour. Understood? She climbed out of the cockpit, her flight suit soaked with sweat, her legs unsteady. Yes, sir, understood. But as she walked past him, she didn't look down. She didn't apologize, because 450 Marines were still alive. And that was all that mattered. The debriefing room was cold, sterile, and hostile. 3 officers sat across from Mara, their faces carved from stone. Colonel Rutledge in the center, a JAG lawyer to his left, and a stone-faced major from Air Combat Command to his right. Mara sat alone, still in her flight suit, her hands folded on the table. She had not been allowed to shower, to eat, or to rest. They wanted her off balance. They wanted her vulnerable. Colonel Rutledge opened a folder, his jaw tight. Captain Cross, do you understand why you are here? Yes, sir. Do you understand the severity of what you did? Yes, sir. Then explain it to me. Explain why you disobeyed a direct order to return to base. Explain why you engaged without forward air controller clearance. Explain why you put a $30 million aircraft at risk for a mission that was deemed unwinnable. Mara met his eyes. Because 450 Marines were about to die, sir. And I was the only one who could stop it. The JAG lawyer leaned forward. Captain, you are not authorized to make that determination. You are a pilot, not a mission commander. You do not have the authority to override operational orders. I had the authority to save lives, sir. That's not how the chain of command works. Then maybe the chain of command is broken, sir. The room went silent. Rutledge's face darkened. Captain Cross, you are dangerously close to insubordination. I'm stating facts, sir. Those Marines were abandoned. Air support was pulled. Ground reinforcements were delayed. They were going to be overrun. I stayed because no one else would. The major from Air Combat Command spoke for the first time, his voice clipped and precise. You also expended all your munitions in a single engagement. You flew below minimum safe altitude. You ignored missile lock warnings. You nearly ran out of fuel over hostile territory. If your engine had failed, you would have been captured or killed. And if I hadn't stayed, 450 Marines would have been slaughtered. You don't know that, the major said coldly. Actually, sir, I do. Ground lead confirmed they were being overrun. They had multiple casualties, no ammunition, and no way out. They gave them the time they needed to regroup and extract. You got lucky, the major snapped. Next time you might not be. Mara leaned forward, her voice hard. There won't be a next time, sir. Because you're going to ground me. You're going to take away my wings, because I refuse to let good men die. And you'll do it to protect the system, to cover your own failures, to make sure no one questions why those Marines were left out there in the first place. Rutledge slammed his hand on the table. Enough, Captain Cross. You are dismissed. You will remain confined to quarters pending a formal investigation. Your flight status is suspended indefinitely. Understood? Yes, sir, understood. She stood, saluted, and walked out. Behind her, the officers sat in silence. Finally, the JAG lawyer spoke. She's right, you know. Those Marines would have died. Rutledge exhaled slowly. I know, but she still broke every rule we have. The major shook his head. So what do we do? Court-martial her? Make an example? Rutledge stared at the closed door. I don't know. But if we do, every grunt in the Corps is going to riot. Because to them, she's a hero. And heroes don't go quietly. Mara sat alone in her quarters, staring at the wall. Her flight suit was still on, stiff with dried sweat and dust. Her hands were steady now, but her mind was racing. She had known this would happen. She had known the moment she stayed in that valley that her career was over. But she didn't regret it. She couldn't. Because when she closed her eyes, she didn't see the faces of the officers in that debriefing room. She saw the faces of the Marines, the ones she would never meet, the ones who were alive because she had refused to leave. That was worth everything. A knock on her door broke the silence. She opened it to find a young Marine corporal, barely 20 years old, holding a sealed envelope. "Ma'am, this was delivered for you. From ground lead." Mara took the envelope, her hands suddenly unsteady. "Thank you, Corporal." The Marine hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Ma'am, my brother was in that valley. Second Battalion, 5th Marines. He called me this morning. He said an A-10 pilot saved his life. He said she stayed when everyone else left. He said she's a hero." Mara's throat tightened. "What's your brother's name?" "Lance Corporal Daniel Hayes, ma'am." "Tell him I'm glad he made it home." "I will, ma'am." "And ma'am, thank you." The Marine saluted and left. Mara closed the door, sat on her bunk and opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten note on torn paper. "Captain Cross, I don't have the words to thank you. You saved my men. You saved my life. You stayed when you didn't have to, when no one would have blamed you for leaving. That takes a kind of courage I've only seen a few times in my life. I don't know what they're going to do to you. I don't know if this letter will make any difference. But I want you to know that every man in my battalion knows your name. And we will never forget what you did. Semper Fi." Captain Luis Montoya, USMC Mara, read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in her pocket. She lay back on her bunk, closed her eyes, and finally, for the first time in 24 hours, she slept. Because whatever happened next, she had done the right thing. And that was enough. The investigation lasted 3 days. During that time, something unexpected happened. The story leaked, not through official channels, but through the Marines themselves. Social media exploded with posts from 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. Photos of Captain Mara Cross, videos of the A-10 firing runs taken from helmet cameras. Testimony after testimony from men who had been there, who had seen her stay when everyone else left. Within 48 hours, the hashtag Valkyrie was trending worldwide. News outlets picked up the story. Veterans groups rallied. Congressmen issued statements. The Pentagon was flooded with calls demanding she be honored, not punished. The pressure became unbearable. Colonel Rutledge was ordered to resolve the situation immediately. On the 4th day, Mara was summoned again. This time, the room was different. Rutledge sat alone, no lawyers, no witnesses. Just him. He looked tired, beaten down. "Captain Cross," he began slowly, "you put me in an impossible position. You broke every rule. You risked everything. And now you're a national hero. The Marine Corps wants to give you a medal. Air Combat Command wants to court-martial you. And I'm stuck in the middle." Mara said nothing. Rutledge sighed deeply. "But here's what I know. Those Marines are alive because of you. That's a fact no one can dispute. So here's what's going to happen. You're getting a formal reprimand in your file. You're going to attend a remedial course on rules of engagement. And then you're going back to flight status." Mara blinked in surprise. "Sir, I don't understand." Rutledge stood, walked to the window. "I'm not rewarding what you did, Cross. I'm acknowledging that sometimes the system fails. And when it does, we need people willing to stand in the gap. Just don't make me regret this. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Understood." 6 months later, Captain Mara Cross flew her final combat mission in Afghanistan. She saved 22 more lives that day. When she returned stateside, she was quietly awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross in a closed ceremony. No press, no publicity, just the Marines she had saved standing in silence as the medal was pinned to her chest. She left the Air Force 2 years later, not in disgrace, but on her own terms. She returned to Montana, bought a small airfield, and started teaching veterans how to fly. They came from all over, broken men and women looking for purpose, and she gave it to them. The same way she had given 450 Marines a second chance at life, by refusing to leave when it mattered most. They still call her Valkyrie, not as a call sign anymore, but as a reminder. That sometimes doing the right thing means breaking all the rules. And that true courage isn't following orders. It's knowing when to disobey them.